Does your wealth align with your values? In what ways does your wealth affect your decision-making? How does wealth impact your family dynamics? These are the big questions we'll help you answer on your road to wealth savviness. Join Amar Shah and his guest experts in the Savvy Wealth Podcast as they share insights and stories to help align your wealth with your values and family dynamics.
Hello and welcome to another podcast with Amar Shah. Today we are going to talk about a very, very important topic when it comes to families of wealth. And that topic is blending families of wealth and blended families of wealth. And, Amar, as we usually start these podcasts, one of the things that I'd like for you to do is tell us the operational definition of what you're talking about. How do you define a blended family?
Yeah, Matt. So blended families, blended families could be married couples in which one or both spouses have children from previous marriages, families with children who are in second or subsequent marriages and or have children from previous marriages. It's really a blending of two different families together. I want to make sure that we're cognizant of that this could happen to mom and dad. This can happen to children. This could happen to grandchildren, right? So this complexity of blended families happens at three different layers that can really impact a family and family dynamics and how financial planning is done in the long run.
Okay. Can you give us an example of one when planning is not done correctly, what goes wrong? And then when planning does go correctly, what could potentially go right?
Yeah, so for an example, when planning is not done right, say you're in your second marriage and one of the spouses were to predeceased. Let's just use the husband because as guys, we tend to pass away earlier. So just actuarially speaking, it's nothing against guys or anything like that. The husband passes away. He hasn't updated his beneficiaries on his IRA and it has his previous spouse. Now, you could have done all the right wills, trusts, all the estate planning documents, but IRAs transfer by operation of contract, and it's whatever's written as the beneficiary on your IRA. So you could have accidentally made your previous spouse the beneficiary of your IRA.
Wow. That could cause problems.
It could cause big problems, especially if you have children from different marriage. You could have two children from your previous marriage, two children from your current marriage, and now you've disinherited three people that you're intending those funds to potentially go to provide income for.
And that's disinheritance by a mistake, right? And after you're gone, if the husband of that situation is gone, I mean, there's not a lot that can be done about that, right?
No, I mean, this was a case that was litigated in the state of California. And the end result was the previous spouse was entitled to that IRA because it was operation of contract.
Wow.
Yeah. And then to give you an example of where good communication, good preparation has gone well, I would say, imagine if you had a family business where your children were involved from your first marriage and children from your second marriage have nothing to do with that business. In this case, we created a family limited partnership where the children started buying ownership of the business through the trust. Everything is documented. There was fair communication. In fact, there was a life insurance policy bought to help fund the children from the second marriage so that, there were also assets transferring that way that were not tied to the business. There was annual family meetings around the communication of what the intentions were for the family, and everything was executed how mom and dad wanted.
Let's talk about those two words that you just used, because you and I both read this article by Dr. James Grubman, who is an expert in communication and in this sort of family planning. When he refers to the two most important things being communication and preparation, let's talk about communication first and what he's referring to and how you refer to it, and then let's talk about preparation.
So you're asking the heart of communication. Why is communication so important?
Right. And what types of communication? Thanks. That's a good point of clarification there, man. That sounded really good in my brain, but I guess it didn't come out as good. When it comes to this sort of planning, what does Dr. James Grubman and what do you mean by, because you just used the word communication, like what sorts of communication do you need to have? When does it need to start? Things like that. Does that make more sense?
Yeah, I mean, I believe communication. So it is a balancing act, right? Because there is some privacy or there is some desire to keep things private and not let other individuals know or to say, hey, we have all these assets. Or it is a balancing act between keeping things private and making sure people are prepared. In the method of communication that I'm talking about here is making sure that there is place some understanding of what your intentions and wishes are, because the part of the communication that where there's a gap is that everybody has their own perspective, children, adult, husband and wife, so everybody has their own perspective in the family, and with that perspective there are assumptions that are made, and heartbreak or the disconnect becomes when those assumptions don't align with what your intentions were.
Gotcha.
And so that communication happens through mediums of having a family meeting. And it's not the first family meeting. You have the first family meeting, there's a lot of emotional baggage that may come out, right? And it's not until the second or third meeting where you actually feel that, hey, we have a plan that we're all comfortable with and moving forward.
Well, let's talk about then preparation, just because you do have to prepare for this. You have to be prepared for the emotional stuff. But as the family, what sort of preparation do they need to do before you have this level of communication, especially with the family meeting?
Yeah, so documents, I would say the first thing is documents need to be updated. When there is a second marriage that happens, while everybody is happy, looking at a prenup, for example, to make sure that it's very clear that while two individuals still like each other, that all the cards are kind of organized, if you will, the rights and obligations if they do divorce or if there's a life event, that could help. Distributions to their children, their prospective children, like what would you like to see happen? There's also a time component to this. So as we're doing the initial planning, 5-10 years later, there could be an adjustment made because of time's gone by. You're more integrated as a family. The desire that which child will be executor or trustee of the overall estate, because you don't want to put. And I've seen it where you have a blended family, and the eldest child from, let's just say, the husband side is going to be trustee. Now you have siblings that may not get along. There could be some discord, and that could cause some family dynamics within itself.
Sure.
Maybe Matt, maybe I can give you some examples.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. Give us some examples. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, let's say you have husband and wife on their second marriage. They're 77, 75. One of the spouses, let's just say the husband, needs long-term care. And so where are we drawing these assets from? Are we drawing it from the husband's assets that they brought prior to this marriage? Or is it the assets that they accumulated together? Because this will draw down different piles of money, will draw down at different rates, and they can have different impacts on the children. And using that same case, let's say the husband passed away and now there's just the surviving spouse, and now you have children from his marriage and her marriage, and the surviving spouse now needs care and is depleting the assets. You could have an income beneficiary of that trust and the children be the end beneficiary, but that could also lead to some discord or even litigation because you've delayed the inheritance to the children that may need it now, because they could be in their 50s or 60s at that point.
Sure.
Another example is so let's think of grandparents, and one spouse passes away and you're in your mid 70s to 80s and you're looking for companionship, and you could potentially get remarried. It's not uncommon for individuals. I mean, for some people it's it's kind of funny to think about, but I have seen people in their late 70s get remarried. Their children also have children, grandchildren could marry somebody else that may have children from a previous marriage, and that individual, job stability may not be so high. How are you going to make those assets fair and blend through that whole family? There are definitely some complexities that could happen there.
Yeah, I want to dive into those complexities just a little bit deeper in just a second. But you talked about a prenup, beneficiaries, executors, trustees, and trusts. Is there something called a postnup? Is there a postnuptial agreement?
There are, those tend to be challenged more frequently. Now, I'm not
Oh,
an attorney
oh,
or,
sure,
or
sure.
anything like that, but from my knowledge base, I would say the best time to start to have these conversations is when everybody is on the same page,
Yeah,
which is typically in the beginning of a relationship. Hey, if we were to blend our families together, what would you like to see happen if you were to pass away?
gotcha.
Or what would I like to see happen if I were to pass away?
Now I want to dive in a little bit deeper to the communication and preparation when it comes to frequency, because in what I just heard you say about, it could be your 80, 70-year-old matriarch and patriarch or matriarch who gets remarried, right? But then if their kids or their grandkids get remarried or have children, documents need to be changed. Amar, how often? And do you provide your clients with some sort of triggering event list? It seems like you would have to be meeting with the family pretty often just to make sure that you're not missing anything. Am I right on that, or?
Yeah, so most of our families that we work with, we're talking at least 6 times a year, throughout the year, and things change. And one of the questions that we may ask is, what has changed since the last time we spoke? Are there any new updates, within your family? When we have conversations that are specific to estate planning, that may happen on an annual basis, but it's kind of a blend of episodic events and doing it on a systematic basis, because the backdrop of all of this is, tax laws can change. When we had in 2017 the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, it capped the state deduction to 10,000, and there could be beneficiaries that are well beyond that, and there could be beneficiaries that are below that. There could also be beneficiaries that are just using the standard deduction, right? And so, transferring property, for example, where mom and dad were paying the property taxes now to the children, but the children use the standard deduction, so now they're not going to be able to take advantage. So there's definitely complexities with tax law that may require more frequent meetings. But I would just say we're engaged with our clients on an ongoing basis,
Mhm.
and we have a specific conversation around estate planning at least once a year.
Now, when you're working with these families of wealth, a lot of them have worked with people previously. Is it normal to meet with somebody and have that level of ongoing communication, or is that what you have found is one of the difference makers and kind of puts you above and beyond anybody who would be technically your competition?
I would say we do it better than anybody else. But what I would say is that if you go to a big firm, they probably have complex planning specialists, but the scope of advice that they can give and how integrated they can be with your attorneys and other professionals may not be to the level that the big firm is comfortable with. So they definitely have guidelines or rails put around that in terms of the advice that they can give. The other part of that is that most estate planning conversations stop at these are the things that you need to do, and then there's no actual implementation. And so what we try to do is, and I like to keep things simple. So for all of our estate planning meetings, think of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, and we draw like a flow chart. This is what you have happening. Are these still your intentions? Here's the tax bill at the end of life that your children will have to pay. This is where the liquidity will come from to pay that tax bill. Are you so comfortable with this? And that conversation will jog different things within the family dynamic. Let me just share something that could be potential here is that you could have in a blended family, you could have children from one spouse that are extremely successful and that don't need the money, and you can have children from the husband's previous marriage, for example, that probably need more help. And then there's always a conversation where fair is not necessarily equal. And so how do you navigate that together? Going back to having communication and having prepared documents around that is a better course of action than not having anything, or to say that, hey, I'm going to be dead, so they'll figure it out. If somebody's on Social Security disability or something like that, and you leave them a chunk of money, well, guess what? You just kick them off of Social Security and disability. So there needs to be some level of planning. There needs to be some level of communication to continue the harmony of the family. And I think all people that have families want that. Deep down inside, they want that. And so that's why I think we do it better, is that we take the time to have the full conversation and do the implementation and to keep track of it on an ongoing basis.
I love that you just said that, families, regardless of their level of wealth, want harmony. And that's a really powerful statement. And making sure that you have really good preparation and really good communication will truly help to maintain or achieve that harmony that almost everybody, I would say everybody's looking for. Harmony might mean different things to different people, but overall it's that sort of balance within the family that the matriarch and patriarch definitely want to make sure is there after they're gone. All right, Amar, closing thoughts or statements or anything you want to kind of highlight from today's podcast?
Communication, be prepared, and do it on an ongoing basis is what I would say is the key to success in a blended family where there are multiple emotions, there's multiple layers of complexity, and there could be multiple life events that could move the needle.
Thank you, Amar.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Really enjoyed doing this podcast and look forward to doing a couple more here.
Fantastic. Well, we just talked about the blending of families of wealth with Amar Shah here at the Savvy Wealth Podcast. If you have any questions, make sure that you reach out to everybody at the team at Client First Capital, and we'll make sure that we have all of those pieces of contact information in the show notes. And if you have not subscribed to the podcast, make sure you click that subscribe now button below. And if you know anybody who is a family of wealth, or if you are a family of wealth, make sure that you are sharing this podcast with other people and all of the podcasts that Amar does, because this is information that you want, and because you want to make sure that you have that harmony within your family, just like everybody else wants that harmony in their family. So for Amar Shah and everybody at Client First Capital, this is Matt Halloran, and we'll see you on the other side of the mic very soon.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Wealth Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The opinions expressed in this program are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual or on any specific security. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult your financial advisor prior to investing. Any past performance discussed during this program is no guarantee of future results. Any indices referenced for comparison are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. As always, please remember investing involves risk and possible loss of principal capital. Please seek advice from a licensed professional. Client First Capital LLC is a registered investment advisor. Advisory services are only offered to clients or prospective clients where Client First Capital LLC and its representatives are properly licensed or exempt from licensure. No advice may be rendered by Client First Capital LLC unless a client service agreement is in place.